All religions would seem to have a dogma, a discipline. Now, how disciplined is Scientology?
The discipline is entirely the limitation of the conduct of the auditor. That is to say, an auditor is a practitioner in Scientology. He listens and he computes. So therefore we call him an auditor. And he is not permitted to evaluate for the person he's working with. He's not permitted to do certain things. He is governed by a code of ethics like the medical field is governed by the Hippocratic Oath. Only we, of course, do not treat the body. We are not interested in illness and so forth. Well, you have to neglect illness and the body and so forth to improve man. And this is quite remarkable. But the whole point here is that the more you handle man as a spiritual being, the more you recognize his spirituality, the more you recognize that he is basically good and that his evil is simply additive to him, why, the more progress you make with the individual man.
This sounds, Mr. Hubbard, in a sense, like an extension of psychology or psychiatry. Can you comment on that?
Oh, no. Psychology is 1870-something, 1879, Wundt decided that men were all animals. As Professor Wundt, Leipzig, Germany, and rather typically a Germanic concept that man is just an animal. He's a sort of a machine, and you adjust the nuts and bolts, and he runs well. Psychiatry has to do with the insane, and we have nothing to do with the insane whatsoever. The insane, well, they're insane. So this is a final disintegration and deterioration of the spirit. That's all the psychiatrists. But psychology, no, I'm afraid we don't have anything to do with psychology. After all, psychology long since stated that their own term, psycheology, meant nothing. And they say in their textbooks they don't know what a psyche is. And of course, psyche is Greek for spirit. So theoretically, they have preempted the name, the study of the spirit. But they do not study the spirit. They regard man as an animal. We are the only ones who study the spirit, so we have to use the word Scientology. And Scientology means knowledge or truth, study of, the study of knowledge or truth. Or if you use it as a Greek sentence, it's I know the word. Is what it works out to be, according to Oxford. I asked them one day up at Oxford, what does Scientology mean? And they said it means really the study of knowledge, or I know the word.
This sounds rather like the command, man, know thyself. Is this part of the Scientology reasoning?
I should think that would have to be part of any philosophic concept of man. You see, if you don't know yourself, you know nothing. And it's all right to guess at what you are, but to know what you are, that is the essence of the whole problem. And it takes a very brave man to really confront what he himself is.
Going back now to this person you mentioned, the auditor, the practitioner in Scientology, just how much training does this person get?
He goes through very intensive training, usually in a city somewhere in the world. He attends an academy, and he is trained there upwards to, well, it actually isn't fair to say the total time of training, because he's trained very intensively and so on. He's trained there sometimes a year, sometimes more, and then his training is normally finished off by coming to a higher level organization and so forth, and he is trained there for more than a year. But the overall training of an auditor compares to the same number of class hours in college of about 12 years. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to study in this particular field. You're handling the raw stuff of life. And his case, his beingness, of course, must advance proportionately to his study. And he has to become better and better. In other words, his IQ has to go up, up, up. The higher the level that he is qualified to audit at, why, the more improved his own case has to be.
You've mentioned two things here, beingness and IQ, which is intelligence factor. Are these two the same?
Oh, no. The beingness, we might put it under the heading, would be the ability of an individual to live or to handle the environment around him. In other words, to be something and to handle things around him. And intelligence is a more or less arbitrary factor. A grade of 70 is something, I think, a moron, and 100 is 105, something like that. That's pretty bright. 138, well, that's genius, and we go up from there.
Could I just stop you here? Did I understand you to say that a person's IQ can be raised through Scientology?
Oh, yes, yes. This is the one thing that Scientology has upset the world's universities with. They used to say that IQ never changed. Nobody could ever change. Nobody could be any different than anybody ever was. And this was quite interesting because when we finally demonstrated this with their own IQ tests, why, they became very upset and began to test much more widely. And they tested people before Scientology processing and after Scientology processing, and uniformly found that their IQ had raised.
Who's they?
The professors, the fields, the schools of philosophy, schools of psychology, and so on.
But surely you've only got as much brain as you're born with.
Oh, no, and the brain has nothing to do with it. Brain is a sort of a, well, I don't know, brain is brain. What it does, I'm never quite sure. But, and I don't think anybody else is, but the person, as a spiritual being, is capable of using his brain, or so on. The brain is a sort of a switchboard. And if you said that a telephone switchboard, then, was the intelligence of the corporation it served, this is about the same statement that the brain establishes the IQ of the human being. It's just not true. A being is a being. He is a spirit, and he actually can exist independent of his body. This is one of the more interesting discoveries in Scientology.
Now, an auditor in Scientology must have beingness and a good IQ. What other talents does he require to be a good auditor? Well,
a person has to have very good moral fiber. You might say he has to, you can't, and we will not take anybody who has even a faintly bad background and so forth as an auditor. He has to be pretty well educated, his general education certificate, something like that. He has to have a desire to help people, and this is not everyone.
You said just now a bad background. In Scientology, what is good and bad? Does it conform to the normal moral standards of society?
Oh, yes, very much so. Very much so. Same.
Mr. Hubbard, I'd like now to take somebody who would like to get into Scientology. How do they go about this?
Well, normally they read books, and they read quite a few books, and they are around and about it for, well, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Well, they're really in Scientology. They will belong to a group and so on. They will get auditing. Their IQ goes up. Their abilities increase. They're more capable in handling their lives. And then somebody decides that he wants to be an auditor. All right, he can go to a school and study this and find out how to be one and so help others.
Now, you mentioned books. You yourself have written a lot of books.
Oh, yes.
Could you give me some titles here?
Well, the earliest book on the subject, of course, is not Scientology, but Dianetics Through Mind. And this book, that's the background of all of this. That's what started all the trouble. A psychiatric textbook publisher knew that I had been studying in the field of man, and knew I had been studying ethnology and anthropology, two very tough words which merely mean study of what man does and has done. And he asked me if I wouldn't please write a textbook that gave the various things which I had found and discovered. And we expected this to sell about 6,000 copies, and I was, in actual fact, going to go to Greece to head an expedition. And I